going to wake up one morning and this whole thing is going to be fixed. Nothing is fixed by miracles. Things are fixed by hard work, commitment, and vision. You have to have a vision. You have to look at other places where things have worked. And then you say, you know something, we've never tried that in North Carolina. Maybe we need to try that. And that's what we're doing. And I believe at the end of the day, teachers are going to be in a lot better shape than they've ever been in North Carolina. If a 14% pay increase is any indication in our very first step of this year, with more to come this year, I don't see how you can argue against that, but you will. You'll find something to argue about. And that's okay. You know, I understand that because, folks, we're fixing this thing, period. I mean, that's what's going to happen. We're going to fix it. I am not, nor is the legislature, going to accept mediocrity anymore. We're not going to do it. Our nation is falling behind. Our state has been falling behind, and we cannot do this. We need to move our nation and our state forward. We are competing with global economies, and we need to have our kids prepared at the next level. And whatever it takes to do that, that is what I am committed to do. I'm not committed to you or you or you. I am committed to everyone in the state of North Carolina to do the very best thing that we can do in our minds. We've tried the old system. We know what we've done and hasn't worked. At least you've got some people in office who are willing to, hey, let's try something different and see if it works. Now, talked about tenure, we talked about vouchers. Let's talk about the budget, the local school budgets. The money that the state sends to each one of the LEAs. North Carolina and the amount of money that they provide, fact, look it up, I'll give it to you. North Carolina, out of 50 states, spends the eighth most in education of any state in the country. Are we spending it the most efficiently as we could? Maybe not, because it's not working as well as we'd like it to work. But nonetheless, the dollars have been there. We've had a commitment of, we are at 8%. That means there's only 7 other states that spend more money on education than we do, than the state of North Carolina does. So it is not money. That's not the issue. It's how is the money being utilized. The boards of education and the school districts have a pile of money that comes into them that they decide how they are going to spend it. We have given them that flexibility. You decide how you are going to spend the money that we send you. That's the Board of Education. We don't tell you how to spend the money. We say, here's the pot of money. Now, you decide what's going to work best for your school district. How is this going to work best for you with this amount of money that we're spending? Some school districts will say, we don't have enough money for assistants. Money's there. You just don't want to fund those assistant positions because you have prioritized and you found something else that you feel is more important than those assistant positions. That's a decision the local school boards make. The state doesn't make that decision. You all make that decision. So, if you've got an argument with the shortages and so forth as to what's going on within your school districts and school systems, go to your Board of Education. Take a look at how they're spending their money. Take a look at where they're spending their money. And see if they are operating at peak efficiency. I don't think there's anybody here in this room that thinks that any school board in the country is working at peak efficiency. Because they're not. State governments don't either, neither, of course, does the federal government. Nobody works at peak efficiency. But the money is there. The money is there. The formulas that are used to determine how much money each LEA receives are formulas that have been in place for 25 years or more. 25 years or more. And perhaps it's time to take a look at these formulas and see if these formulas are actually still working. because they may not be working any longer. We've got school districts based on the old formula that are in declining population areas that are not getting as much in funding as they would like. I'll use Chowan County as an example because that's where I live. In the last 5 to 6 years, Chowan County, whose population has not decreased in that period of time, we are still at just under 15,000. Chowan County has lost over 350 students in the public school system, and there are no private schools in Chowan County. They've lost 350 students in the last 5 years. Now, if you take that 350 and multiply it by about $8,500, you're going to see a pretty staggering sum of money that the local school districts have lost through no fault of their own, necessarily. It's just, that's the way it is. The population is left, kids are going elsewhere to school. I know a lot of the kids in Norfolk travel up to Suffolk to go to school, those who can afford to do it. But that's part of the losses that people are talking about in some of these school districts is, you know, we're not getting as much money from the state as we used to get. You're right. We don't pay for empty seats. You only get paid for the seats where students are sitting in them. And if you're losing students, you're losing money. That's a fact. And in the case of Eden and Chowan, 350 schools times $8,500, do the math, I think it's probably 400 and some odd thousand or close to 400,000. This year alone, no, it's more than that. Oh my golly, it's much more than that. This year, because this year alone, their numbers were like 44, 45 less than what they were a year ago. And so that in itself was about $365,000 that they lost in funding. Just this year. Just this year. So we don't have any control over that. We are using the same formulas that have been put in place years ago. Now maybe that's a problem. Maybe we need to take a look at the formulas and see how we can change them to try and protect these school districts and these regions that are losing population. If you're losing population, you've still got to keep the schools open. We've got to educate the kids, so you've got to have money. So we need to try and find a way to get that money for the school system. And that is something that we are looking at. We're looking at the formulas to see if perhaps maybe that can be changed. But it is, it's very easy to wage an argument and level it at the state. We're not getting enough money. We're not getting enough money. We're not getting enough money. It's just not true. It is not. We spent more money in education this year, K through 12, than we did last year. I'll show you the numbers. I'll show them to you, and you can like it. Let you see them. Peek at them. So we're out to fix it. We're trying to fix it. I think that I have covered about everything I wanted to cover in just my opening remarks. I would like to hear from you.
Bob, would you cover the master's pay?
Yes, master's incentive, okay. The master's incentive pay, something that I supported and was taken away in the last budget, is not being reinstituted. They used some of the money that would go to that they could have used for that to reinstitute the master's pay incentive to rather instead to try and shore up all teacher salaries at all levels. And as I said, you're going to be getting raises as well later on. You who are teachers later on this year. There was no quantitative data that could prove that teachers with masters, that their students did any better than the ones that didn't. That's just data. I believe in education. I'm a college graduate. I think if anybody's in education, they're certainly getting a master's is a good thing, especially if it's in their area of specialization. I fought to keep the master's incentive at the end of the day. I was on the short end as far as that. Now what they have done is they have taken, elongated the date, pushed it into July of 2013, when people who are already in a master's program will be able to qualify for master's incentive pay. It was in May, I think, which I didn't quite understand, but we have now changed that so it's I believe it's July of 2013. So anybody who's in is still going to be in, and they're going to get that master's pay. Read to Achieve, I know there's been a lot of talk about that, and certainly the last thing that any of you want is more tests. There's entirely too many tests the teachers they're having to administer, and certainly nobody wants one more. But we've had some problems with that. I know the test scores were not very good at all. And there was a hearing, a joint House and Senate education hearing on that plan, and Dr. Atkinson was there when that was, she was answering questions and so on and so forth. And the bottom line is, I think one of the reasons for failure stated in the News and Observer is the plan was not implemented properly, and Dr. Atkinson's even admitted to that there were some things that weren't done as they should have been done. So there's been a lot written about that as well. You know, we hear a lot of things from teachers we hear very often, well, you ought to walk in my shoes. And you don't have any idea what I do during the course of a day. And I know teachers, it's a very, very hard job, and obviously with some of the problems that we have in the households today, and some of these kids are coming from broken houses and broken homes, rather, excuse me, and they're challenging. It's very, very challenging. So you're trying to control an entire classroom, and that's not always easy. And I understand that. But what I'm going to do is, for any of you who would like me to do this, I'd be more than happy to do it. Any of you who would like me to walk in your shoes for a day, in any school system, any school, let me know. I'll be more than happy to come into your classroom for the day, and I'll follow you right into the lunchroom. The only place I won't go is into the restroom. If you're a female, when you go, I'll go to the other room. But I'm with you. Everything you do, I want to see it. I want to see just exactly what you're dealing with at all levels, both even in kindergarten, in grade school, and also in high school as well. So I'm putting that out there, and for those of you that would like to take advantage of that, all you got to do is contact me. My name is in the paper every day, just about, with all of my contact information. Contact me. We'll find a date that works for all of us, and you'll have me for a day. I think there might be about 40 schools in the district, so in my district, in my legislative district, so it would probably take about 40 weeks to get through it, but the sooner we start, the sooner we can get done. So I'm willing to do that, and I will have then a better understanding of what you mean when you say you need to walk in my shoes. So I've got my shoes on, I'm ready to walk. Okay. Now, at this point in time, I think I have covered everything that I wanted to cover. I think everything that you wanted perhaps to hear, maybe some things you didn't want to hear. But I can tell you this, that anything that I shared with you tonight can be positively and unequivocally documented by fact. So if you have any questions about anything I said, give it to me. I'll send you the factual information. Be glad to do it. Happy to do it. So now we'll open up for questions. Are you going to write questions down, or how are you?
You willing to, and we'll take some from the gallery here. We just ask people to be polite. There is a chance that you might give him a question he doesn't know. And in that case, it's always appropriate to say, I don't know, but I'll get back with you. So I would like to point out one thing as far as school choice. When my youngest son was in elementary school, I actually considered putting him in private school because I had one of those teachers that everybody gets every now and then, you know. And I just went through a lot of choices and ended up staying in public schools. The difference in me as a parent not being an educator is, and please correct me if it has changed, but I believe educators do have a choice in their counties, maybe not so in the smaller counties where there might be one elementary school, but in Pasquotank, can teachers still select which elementary school they want their child in? Has that changed? When did they change that?
It's I have a 5-year-old. You can petition the board, but they would need to be converted.
Okay, curious, because when I was coming along, teachers did have that choice. Okay, so they took that away from y'all too, as an incentive. Okay, so I stand corrected there.
Okay.
Anybody want to, and I prefer to hear from the educators first. We'll give them the first round, Polly.
And I'm not going to try and bluff an answer. If I don't know the answer, I'm going to tell you I don't know it. I don't consider myself to be a politician. Obviously, I told you what I make and how many hours I'm putting in. If there was any description of a public servant, I'm it. And others that are serving in the legislature equally. It is a very, very difficult job. You shouldn't be in this unless you absolutely cared about this and you want to make the lives of the people that you represent better, all of them. You want to create a future for them. It's the only reason you do this. I don't need my ego fed. I wrote a newspaper column for years. I could see my picture in the paper every single week. And I could say whatever I wanted. It didn't make any difference what people thought because I didn't care. It didn't make any difference. This is a little bit different. You're going to, you've got to be up in front of audiences and you've got to listen to what they have to say and then try and rationalize in your own mind and talking with others in the community and in that particular field. And within the legislature, folks with a lot more expertise than I, to try and come up with something that is going to work and be in the best interest of everybody. So, having said that, I'll go ahead and I'll open it up. Yes, ma'am. And just announce your name and where you teach, if you would. Please.
Okay, great. I am Dr. Amy Swain. I'm an educational researcher and a professor of teacher education at East Carolina University. And thank you for being here. And I understand that your administration has, as you say, inherited problems. And certainly teachers over the last 10 years and more have not been very, very well in North Carolina. I do want to ask you, maybe challenge you a bit on charter schools as an option for alternative schools and alternative school choices. Simply because, and I know that you mentioned that both Barack Obama and Arnie Duncan, I think that was sort of your nod to like the liberals, is that...
It was. You picked up on that. Good. That was intended to be just that.
But most educational professionals actually, no matter the side of the line that they find themselves on, don't agree with either Barack Obama or Arnie Duncan because they're not making good choices. Educational theorists do not agree with the politics of Common Core or...
I'm with you on Common Core. I don't either.
Right. So there's a lot of actually research being done around the detriment that that particular faction is causing education, including what they're doing with standardized testing and accountability across the board. So I wanted to correct you on that, or at least let you know.
Excuse me, Doctor, what were you correcting me on?
Well, because you gave a nod as if to supplement your own position on charter schools and incentive pay, and when you gave the nod for the liberals. But I wanted to tell you that while well-intentioned, that nod was not actually right. Because those people aren't doing really good either, is what I'm saying.
Who, Arnie Duncan and Barack Obama?
Right.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I bet you would. So the charter schools you mentioned in North Carolina, the 129, Duke University just put out a study about what actually the charter schools are doing in Durham, and in some they are destroying Durham public schools, the charter schools there, because you have white flight taking place and the schools left behind are crumbling because they don't have the infrastructure to support their students. And across the board in many other states, charter schools are having the exact same effect. If you go to the Center for Research on Education Outcomes, it's called CREDO. They have they're out of Steinburg University, and they've done a study on charter schools and the impact of charter schools on educational outcomes. And what they found is that charter schools have either no impact on educational outcomes versus public schools, or they have a negative outcome for...
With all due respect, I've seen data that would be contrary to what you're suggesting. So there's data all over the map on that. You're just articulating your position, and I accept that.
Right. So, and that's
I've seen different data.
That's part of, I think, having a dialogue
Doctor, thank you for your comments. And strangely enough, with all that this going on, we actually, I think we agree on several things here, and that's a good start. I would say to you this, that the Durham Public Schools, you're saying they're falling apart and they're crumbling because of the charter schools that are there, in part, perhaps, maybe not entirely, but in part. Well, wouldn't that indeed make the argument, why are these people leaving the public schools to begin with?
Well, so
And fleeing to charter schools? I mean, didn't you in fact just make the point?
So here's the thing about charter schools, that while indeed they are a public school, there are many provisions on charter schools because they're not held to the same regulations that public schools are. And so what happens with charter schools is they don't have to provide ESL services for students, and they don't have to provide special ed services for students. And these are things that the public school has to pay for out of their budget. And that's why...
Out of taxpayer dollars.
Right.
Yes.
And so, because these are our children, right? But see, charter schools...
They're all our children,
Right.
Doctor. They're all our children.
But charter schools, the funding that charter schools gets, while they're having public school children, they're not also having to drain off funding, as it were, for special needs that public schools are having to do. So actually their per spending is more than what public schools have, because they get to select the students that they have. And vouchers, while there can be lotteries and things like that, if a student were to apply to a charter school and did not have, and they required, say, ESL services or ELL services, or they required free or reduced lunch, right? Charter schools aren't mandated by law to provide those things for those students. And so that wouldn't be a viable option for a student who required those services to go, which means that they aren't open to the public in the same way that public schools are open to the public. They don't provide the same services for the public that public schools do.
Well, and you heard me mention about the opportunity scholarships, of course, and there are, that which has nothing to do with charter schools. I mean, that we're talking about private schools in that regard. But the fact of the matter is this, in spite of everything you've said, you've stated it so eloquently, and I don't disagree with much of what you've said. The fact of the matter is, what is the solution?
Right.
Letting those kids stay in that school and continue to fail, that's not an acceptable solution to me. I will not be a part of that. I'm not going to do it.
I don't think it's that children, see, it's interesting to me because the children you talk about that would go to charter schools are actually not those that would fail in public schools anyway. The failing students are the ones that we need to be paying attention to in raising up and not providing avenues for the top achieving students to go somewhere else to get a quote-unquote better education, right? If we raise the bottom, then that would provide more for students across the board.
Well, haven't we been trying to do that for the last decade? Charter schools just broke the 100 threshold when they lifted the cap about 3 or 4 years ago. And so the numbers weren't there a decade ago.
Right.
And money was being spent and spent and spent and spent, but the bottom wasn't lifted up.
Right.
So we need to lift the bottom up, and we need to do everything we can to try and do that. There is nothing to fear from school choice.
Okay.
Nothing. Nothing to fear. It should make the public schools want to do better and actually perform better. Its competition is good in everything. One size fits all is not good. If you were I'm your financial planner, okay? The way I've been doing the market lately, you would not want me to be your financial planner. But if I were, and I said to you, I'll tell you what, you've got a limited amount of money that you can spend and you're saving it for your retirement. And I said to you, I can guarantee you, you need to put all of your money into this one entity. This thing is going to be great. It's going to provide you rewards like you've never imagined. Chances are probably pretty good you're not going to do it, because nobody should put their life savings into one thing, one account. Not everybody is going to be able to prosper as a student in the environment of a public school. It's the same theory. We're trying to force, this argument is, it's the public schools or nothing. And it's not the public schools or nothing. There is choice in education. Choice is good. So I understand what you're saying. We've got 129 charter schools. You know what the average enrollment is at those schools? It's not much. So do the numbers and then take a look at the hundreds of thousands of students that we have across the state of North Carolina attending our public schools. So this is not a threat. This is something that is meeting the needs of taxpayers who feel that their needs are not being met in the public school environment. And for us to tell them, I'm sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Taxpayer, you are going to be forced to send your kids to this school, whether this school is working for your child or not. This is what you're going to be mandated to do. Not my world. No.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you for your question.
Bob, can I say something as a parent
Yes.
that she brought up, and I think it's a good point too. She indicated that the public schools have to meet English as a second language. They have to deal with autistic children, children who require almost 24-hour care. And I've had a good friend that taught in a classroom like that. When my child was in the 3rd grade, they had the 100-day thing at Northside, and you brought 100 something to school, and I went in for the day, and there was a child sitting there with an adult beside him. And after an hour, I realized that that adult stayed very close to that one child. And so when I got a chance on a break, I asked the teacher. That child had severe something. And to put it politely, he wasn't wired right. And to stay in that classroom, there was an adult paid to stay by him all day long. And I feel really bad about saying this, but that child, I know what happened as he went through school. He has no chance of being a very productive member of our society. But a large amount of our tax money went to keep him in the classroom.
Right.
That's what we're fighting. I understand, and I understand that. But as a parent of a child he wasn't super gifted, but he probably could have been had he didn't want to finish first all the time. What happens to those kids who have ability and are lost because someone else is being paid to sit by someone? They're going to be the ones having to produce for that child as an adult.
You're raising concerns that I feel are really, they're disconcerting, because what you're saying is that should we be able to cherry pick which students we do and do not educate? Or do we get to say, well, I don't think that student deserves an education or deserves...
And that's why I qualify that it bothers me to say this.
Right.
I think that sometimes giving the money that we have to spend on students, and it's not an infinite amount, that we have to look at how we spend our money. Just like I'm not going to go out and buy a Coach bag when I need I'm going to throw it on the ground, or I can afford $10.
But had you given birth to a child with special needs, you would damn sure want someone to sit in there with your child.
No, I
so
would
that
not.
they got-
No, I would not. No, I would not. That's the difference. That's the difference. Let me back up
Folks,
here.
let's remember what we were
Let me
doing.
back up here.
Excuse me just for a minute, Betsy.
Okay.
There's going to be no outbursts.
She needs to sit down and let people ask questions.
Well, that's fine.
She's talking too much.
Bessie, Dorsey,
Mr.
you were
Harris,
on the
we're
last
here
meeting.
because
You're not
of
in
me
charge of
tonight.
this meeting. Just hang on for a minute.
Thank you
okay?
very much.
You're welcome, Mr. Harris. Yes, Pete.
Oh, I have a comment to make. You always hear, and I raised 2 daughters. Mr. Harris was one of my daughter's teachers. And we thought he did a very good job with my daughter. He was very instrumental in her being the young lady that she is. My concern is this: we talk about no child left behind. But where is the part where there's no child held back? Because we act like it's a crime for high achievers to want to excel. So we have this one model for all the kids, and they have to fit in that model, but high achievers should be trying to reach for the stars. And it doesn't matter what color you are, what sex you are, our high achievers should have an avenue, such as the charter schools, to go to be high achievers, because they're the